Christian Apologetics. It's October 12th and 13th in Charlotte, North Carolina. Get the early bird discount when you register by August 1st at ses.edu.
You can't call me a racist or fascist for picking out problems within the Islamic ideology.
Good economic news is starting to break through. If you looked 6 months ago, you would say it was doomsday for Republicans.
If you are born black and you don't accept your natural status as a victim, then the validity of your blackness is immediately called into question.
Some people say, well, taxes are regressive, but in this case, yes, they are. That's the good thing about them, because the problem is in people that don't have a lot of money. And so higher taxes should have a bigger impact on their behavior and how they deal with themselves.
The fastest growing political parties in every single country in Europe are anti-Islamist political parties. Whether you like it or not, it's happening.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged.
An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Howdy, and welcome to a brand new week of broadcasting here on Focal Point, American Family Radio. My name is Brian Fisher, congenial, convivial, amiable, and effervescent as always. My gratitude to the inestimable Fred Jackson for filling in for me on Friday. I was traveling for AFA, meeting with a donor group on Friday night, another donor group on Saturday night, along with Ed Vitagliano and Wesley Wildman. Had a great time, room packed with AFA donors and supporters. Great experience both nights, Friday night in Plano, Saturday night in Waco. Great experience, great people, all of them very enthusiastic about the work of AFA, and so we were happy and delighted and excited to meet with them. Well, let's turn our attention to the Word of God as we begin this brand new week of broadcasting. Now, we are in 2 Kings 17 today, and 2 Kings 17 is a record of the fall of the nation of Israel. This is the northern kingdom. Remember, kingdom of David was divided at this time into two kingdoms, the northern kingdom of Israel, the southern kingdom of Judah. Chapter 17 records the fall of the kingdom of Israel, the northern kingdom, to the armies of Assyria. This happened in about 721 BC. The fall of Jerusalem, which we will get to eventually, happened in about 586 BC. So this is some, 140 years prior to that, is the nation of Israel fell, and we are told why then this nation fell. It says this occurred in verse 7 because the people of Israel had sinned against the Lord their God. They had feared other gods. They had walked in the customs of the nations whom the Lord drove out before the people of Israel. People of Israel did secretly against the Lord their God things that were not right. They did wicked things, provoking the Lord to anger, and they served idols of which the Lord had said to them, "You shall not do this." And the Lord had warned Israel and Judah by every prophet and seer, but the people of Israel despised his statutes and the covenant that he had made with them. They abandoned all the commandments of the Lord their God. They burned their sons and daughters as offerings and used divination and omens and sold themselves to do evil in the sight of the Lord, provoking him to anger. Therefore the Lord was very angry with Israel and removed them out of his sight. Now, Judah also did not keep the commandments of the Lord their God, but God was more patient with them, in part because of the legacy of David, and in part because Judah never departed into Baal worship. They had one king that tried to bring Baal worship into the kingdom of Judah. They got rid of that in time. They continued, even though their worship was often half-hearted, they continued to worship Yahweh as their God. Now, a couple of lessons from this before we go to prayer. You know, one of the lessons here is that our nation is far more dependent for our national security on our spiritual strength rather than our military strength. Now, we think falsely that the secret to our national security is a strong military. We think that all we need, that's not that we don't need a strong military, I'm not saying that, but many people in America think that we're fine. We don't really need to worry about the spiritual health of our people because we have the world's strongest military, can protect us from any and all of our enemies. But what we see here is no matter how strong your military is, if a nation is spiritually soft, if it is spiritually weak, it is vulnerable to decay, to disruption, and ultimately to defeat. Now, a second thing that we see here is that God is patient with nations and people. We see his patience on display here with Israel. Remember, they separated from the kingdom of Judah in 931. So this is almost 200 years later, and that 200 years was a period of unremitting Baal worship. They worshiped and served pagan gods. They participated in pagan rituals, including offering their sons and daughters to Molech. If you remember, we've talked about Molech before. He was a god of the pagans around them that had his arms outstretched. His arms were tilted at an angle so you could put the body of a baby on it. The baby would roll down the arms into the belly of the idol, in which a white-hot fire was kept burning. So they actually passed their children through the fire, burned them to death in the belly of the god Molech. That's just what we do today in abortion. So God has a certain amount of patience. He is patient, but his patience does have limits, and that's what we need to worry about here in America. You know, and judgment fell because they worshiped and served and believed in and prayed to gods other than the God that is revealed in the pages of Scripture. You know, and it's interesting. He says, look, the prophets warned the people about this, but they continued to engage in the worship of a multitude of gods. And one of the lessons here, the final lesson before we go to prayer, is that the quickest way to destroy a nation is through multiculturalism in religion. I'm going to repeat that. The quickest way to destroy a nation is through multiculturalism in religion. Believing and teaching and affirming that all religions are equal, all religions have equal merit, all religions are equally useful, and we should not and cannot and must not prefer any one religion over another. That, my friends, is a recipe for disaster. All religions are not equally valid, and it is a path to destruction to believe that they are. So the most patriotic thing we can do, ladies and gentlemen, as we come out of Memorial Day, the most patriotic thing you and I can do is worship the true and the living God. Well, let's go to prayer, and this, as I say every day is a National Day of Prayer here at Focal Point. We are going to pray a prayer of confession to God for the sins that we have committed as a people. Please join me. Lord God, we read here of the tragic end of the kingdom of Israel. We confess that we as a nation are committing many of the same sins that they committed. We confess that we have sinned against you, the Lord our God. We have worshipped other gods and followed the practices of nations that do not know you. We have secretly done things against you that are not right. We have burned incense to other gods and have done wicked things that provoke you to anger. Even though you have warned us to turn from our evil ways, to observe the commands that are in accordance with the entire Word of God, we have not listened and have become as stiff-necked as the fathers of Israel. We have followed worthless idols and have ourselves become worthless. We have forsaken your commands and sought to govern our lives by the stars. We practice divination and sorcery. Through the practice of abortion, it is as if we have sacrificed our sons and daughters in the fires of Molech. We confess that we have compromised the purity of true worship by adulterating it with practices from other nations and religions. I pray that you will shed your spirit abroad in our land so that we may return to you. May we realize once again as a people that you and you alone are the God we must worship. In the name of Jesus, amen.
Okay, here's the big question with regard to any big decision. Is this going to work? Well, if you've heard about MediShare, a brilliant way of sharing healthcare costs, you may have wondered that, yeah, but does it actually work? So did Dr. Stuart Hoover, who initially joined to save a lot of money. The typical family saves about $500 a month. Stuart saved even more.
When we first joined MediShare, we were immediately going from a little over $1,600 a month down to $460 basically a month.
So that's wonderful, but then his wife needed emergency surgery. The bills added up to $160,000.
So we were seeing the bills coming in, and then the bills were being paid. Portions were being shared, and the end result of this is this bill was taken care of.
Yes, MediShare works, and it's so easy to get your questions answered. Why not? You can call right now. Just hit **345. That's **345, **345.
David, the son of Jesse, just an ordinary giant slayer. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Minute. David's battle with Goliath is an epic drama where the little boy stands in God's power to conquer the Philistine giant. David didn't awaken that morning expecting to slay a giant. He didn't stroll in with an entourage after a rugged mountain range training camp like Rocky and Rocky IV. He was just a regular kid bringing his brother's lunch, but fully confident in God's immeasurable power. Though he saw Goliath, David never acknowledged him as a giant, saying, "Who is this uncircumcised Philistine who dare defy the Lord of hosts?" When regular people are fully persuaded, fully confident in God's power, giants fall.
Listen each weekday from 5 to 6 p.m. Central for the Hamilton Corner with Abraham Hamilton III, public policy analyst for the American Family Association.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Howdy, welcome back to Focal Point. Brian Fisher is my name. Got a winnable war moment from the Supreme Court today, of all places. Just reading from USA Today, the Supreme Court today refused to block an Arkansas law targeting medication abortions, which threatens to leave the state with only one abortion clinic. Here in Mississippi, we only have one abortion clinic. Arkansas could soon be joining us there and will soon be joining us there. Without comment or objections, the court turned away Planned Parenthood's challenge to the 2015 law. A federal judge had said it places an undue burden on women seeking abortions, but the appeals court said opponents first needed to estimate how many women would be affected, and they could not do it. The High Court ruled in 2016 that a Texas law imposing strict limits on abortion clinics was unconstitutional because it would reduce the number of facilities in operation from 40 to about 7 or 8. The challenge to Arkansas law was based on that precedent. But for now, the justices ruled that the law can stand. So that's a winnable war moment for today. Supreme Court allowing a new law in Arkansas to stand, which could reduce and will reduce the number of abortion clinics in the state of Arkansas down to 1. So that's a winnable war moment right off the bat. Now, I want to talk to you about another story I saw. To me, this is a fascinating story. I live for stories like this. And this is very, very important because it is really rather amazing and incidental confirmation of the Word of God and what it teaches about origins. Remember, there are only two explanations for origins. One is evolution, that everything happened by chance, everything came into being, nothing produced everything, and so forth. And that somehow or other, through some process they've never been able to explain, some mysterious ball of highly dense matter blew up at the beginning of everything and produced the universe. This very dense ball of matter just exploded, and it brought the universe into being. Now, you ask them, as I have often done in debates with evolutionists, well, I'm not going to spot you that dense ball of matter. Where did it come from? And they have no answer to that question. They cannot tell you where that dense ball that blew up and they cannot tell you where it came from. So they've got no answer to the most basic and most fundamental question you can ask. Why is there something rather than nothing? Nothing. We've got an answer to this because God wanted to create a universe. He wanted to create people with whom he could have a relationship. That's why it exists. That's our answer. We've got an answer. Evolutionists do not. But here is a story. Got this off of phys.org. That's PHYS, short for physics. And the title of the piece, Sweeping Gene Survey Reveals New Facets of Evolution. Now, what in reality this thing does, by the way, this whole thing started with a genetic test, a handheld genetic test, that they had developed to try to identify which sushi bars were trying to pawn off tilapia for tuna. And so they had a quick genetic test to be able to unmask these restaurants. And now they figured, you know what we can do? Some of these researchers said, look, we have 5 million gene snapshots, DNA barcodes, that have been collected from 100,000 animal species by hundreds of researchers around the world. And they've all been deposited in the U.S. government-run GenBank database. So Mark Steckel from the Rockefeller University in New York and David Thaler at the University of Basel in Switzerland published their findings last week. Now, what they challenge is what the textbooks say about biology, that species with large, far-flung populations, you think like ants and rats and humans, will become more genetically diverse over time. They found that that is not true. They do not become more genetically diverse over time. This study, by the way, published in the journal Human Evolution. Now, here's the first pull quote from the article, the study's most startling result. Now, remember, again, these are scientists, not a theologian in the batch. These guys probably never even read the first chapter of Genesis. If they read it, they don't believe it. But here's the pull quote from the article. The study's most startling result, perhaps, is that 9 out of 10 species on Earth today, including humans, came into being 100 to 200,000 years ago. In other words, at about the same time. Now, they use a different scale, obviously, than we use, but the point is that these scientists have examined the DNA database of 100,000 animal species, and they've come to the conclusion that all living things came into being at about the same time. This is a mind blower, ladies and gentlemen. This will completely turn Darwinianism upside down and on its head. And one of these scientists said, look, this conclusion is very surprising, and I fought against it as hard as I could. And that's what the next paragraph says. That reaction is understandable. How does one explain the fact that 90% of animal life, genetically speaking, is roughly the same age? What's the explanation for that? God created it all at the same time. In the space of 6 days, he created everything that exists. All living things created in the space of 1 week. No wonder when you look at the DNA, they indicate that all living species are about the same age. I mean, this is just an amazing thing, ladies and gentlemen. This is science telling us that all living things came into being at the same time. Do you realize how earth-shattering this is for the standard theory of evolution that requires some kind of ancient soup in which microbes and neurons and whatever else they got, protons and all that stuff, electrons were swirling around in the soup and suddenly, mysteriously, came together. We don't know where the primordial soup came from. I'm not going to spot them that. They got to tell us where that came from. And they got to tell us where these electrons and these protons and these neutrons came from that are swimming around in this soup. And it happened it happened billions of years ago and millions of years ago. But here we have science telling us they all came into being at the same time. Here's another pull quote. In analyzing DNA barcodes across 100,000 species, researchers found a telltale sign showing that almost all the animals emerged about the same time as humans. They pose this question later in the article. Why did the overwhelming majority of species in existence today emerge at about the same time? They have no answer to that question, and we do. They came into being at the same time because just as the Bible says, there is a creator who created them all at the same time. Ladies and gentlemen, do not doubt this book. Now, there's another interesting thing late in the paragraph, right before you get done with the article. Another unexpected finding from the study, species, listen to this, species have very clear genetic boundaries, and there is nothing much in between. So what they're saying is that all of these specimens of animal life have clear genetic boundaries. There's no indication, there's no evidence whatsoever of one species slowly, gradually morphing into something else. There are clear genetic boundaries between this species and then the one that they think is the next highest species on the evolutionary ladder. And what does Genesis 1 say? This phrase is in there 11 times in Genesis 1. How do animals reproduce according to Genesis 1? After its kind. What does that mean? That there are clear genetic boundaries between the life forms that God created in Genesis 1. And the last line in the whole article, the absence of in-between species is something that also perplexed Darwin. What they're talking about here is transitional forms, missing links. Now, Darwin believed that the solution to his missing link problem was just going to be the discovery of more fossils. We just need to discover more fossils, and we'll find those missing links. Well, we have been uncovering fossils since the days of Darwin now, well over 150 years, 160 years. And you know what? We have fewer missing links than we did when we started, because Darwin thought there were some forms that represented missing links. Scientists have studied those, examined this, and say, you know, they're not. They're not connected to each other. You can't make some kind of linear connection between that fossil here and this fossil over here. So we actually have fewer transitional forms than when we started. I mean, you can see, ladies, I am pumped about this article.
You know, one thing interesting, I don't know if you already mentioned this or not, but one of the main researchers in there had mentioned that he fought hard and long to come to this conclusion, that he fought against that.
He resisted
but
it.
But in the end, he couldn't do anything else.
Yeah, he resisted it with every fiber of his being. So but eventually the evidence compelled him to yield.
Yeah, and that's interesting, and I think that's a big part of this, because it's not somebody with a Christian bias going out trying to find a conclusion.
Right.
It comes from somebody that didn't want to believe
In fact, he went with an evolutionary bias, and he was looking to find evidence that supported his evolutionary bias, and he couldn't do it.
Yeah.
He eventually realized, you know, all the evidence is pointing in a different direction. So there's two major takeaways from this article. You know, we ought to put this up on our Facebook page, Jeff.
All right.
Do you know where to get it? Okay. We'll put this up on the Facebook page so you can find it for yourself, because, you know, I mean, you ought to print this article out. I'm going to write a column on this tomorrow, but you ought to print this out. You ought to share it. You ought to make copies of it, share it with your Sunday school class, share it with your pastor, share it with everybody that you know, that almost all the animals emerged about the same time as humans. That's a scientific conclusion, not a theological one. These guys probably didn't even know about Genesis 1. And also, the overwhelming majority of species in existence emerged at about the same time, exactly what the Bible says, and there are clear genetic boundaries with nothing in between. There are no missing links. There are no transitional forms, the same thing that bothered Darwin. But the Bible says God created them all in 6 days, and he created them to reproduce after their kind. Whoa! Be right back.
This is Dr. Richard Land, president of Southern Evangelical Seminary. Welcome to Bringing Every Thought Captive. Before we completely leave the celebrations of Memorial Day for another year, I want to share with you an experience I had at Ben Gurion Airport in Tel Aviv as I was preparing to come home from a journey to the Holy Land. I saw a man between 65 and 70 waiting for the same plane that I was to go back to America. He had on a ball cap that said, Vietnam War Veteran. As I almost always do in such situations, I went over and shook his hand and thanked him for his service to our country. And I told him that I hoped he knew that he had the gratitude of a grateful nation. As often happened, he teared up. He thanked me profusely and told me that it meant a lot to him because all he got when he came home in 1968 was scorn. Then I got on the plane and read about a documentary on the Vietnam War put out by Ken Burns and Lynn Novak. And they pointed out that the Vietnam War drove a stake right into the heart of America, and it is not completely healed yet. Whatever your views about the war were, the soldiers who were called to serve served and served bravely and well, and we shouldn't take out any animosity on them. We should be grateful. As one platoon commander in Vietnam said as he was talking about the documentary, quote, 19-year-old high school kids from the lowest economic ring of American society, they weren't going to be much awarded for service in Vietnam, and yet their infinite patience, their loyalty to each other, and their courage under fire was phenomenal. And you would ask yourself, he said, how does America produce young men like this? The next time you see a Vietnam vet, tell him thank you. Tell his family thank you. This is Richard Land.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio. Listen to the audio podcast or download today's program at afr.net. You can also read Brian Fisher's columns at afa.net. afa.net.
Howdy, welcome back to Focal Point. Brian Fisher here alongside Jeff Reed and Rob Gardner as my running mates.
I'm thinking maybe we should change from howdy to, well, I mean, it's not really a ship greeting, is it? I mean,
ahoy.
Ahoy, okay.
Ahoy, mateys.
Yeah, but
I don't know.
No, howdy sounds better. Okay.
Well, it's like you know, that's what you hear on the USS Arizona or the USS Idaho. I mean, you get a ship
howdy.
from the west.
Yeah, there you
That's
go.
going to be the official greeting. Anyway, glad to have you in the conversation.
Your column is up.
Okay, great. I got a column up at afa.net. Jeff is going to post the link on the Facebook page, and he's going to tweet it out as well. You need to read this column, not because it's well written, not because I deserve a Pulitzer for it, because I do not, just ordinary writing, but the content. I'm going to go over it with you right now, but you have got to get your hands on this content because this is a stunning story out of the UK. It's an attention-getting story from the United Kingdom, and it reveals something not only about Islam, but also about the capitulation of the West to what I call the Ebola virus of culture, which is the religion of Islam. One thing before we get into that story, you know what jihadists do? Ramadan's their holy month. Ramadan is the holiest month of the year in the Islamic faith. It's kind of like our Christmas. Christmas is our holy season. December is our holy month. Now, what do Christians do during our holy month? Well, we will get an Advent calendar out. We used to do this with our kids. You had an Advent calendar. We'd have a little piece of chocolate for every day, but each Advent calendar would reveal one aspect of the coming of Christ. We'd read Bible verses. We go to Christmas Eve services. We spend our time looking for presents to give to the people that we love, sort of in memory of the gift that Christ gave to the world. We go to Christmas Eve services. We might go to Christmas morning services. We read the Christmas story before we open gifts on Christmas Eve and so forth. That's what Christians do during their holy month. You know what devout Muslims do during their holy month? They blow people up. Here it is from Breitbart. Listen to this. Jihadists have killed more than 200 people and injured in excess of 300 others so far during Ramadan, the holiest month for Muslims. This is in the first 10 days of the month. First 10 days of the most holy month in the Islamic year, Muslims, in the name of Allah, have racked up a casualty list of 525. 203 people dead, killed by Muslim devotees in the first 10 days. The average is 20 people killed a day and 30 injured every single day during Ramadan. At least 52 attacks have taken place, an average of 5 attacks a day. And part of the reason is that jihadists, devout Muslims, many of them, believe that it's exceptionally heroic during the month of Ramadan to kill infidels, and that Allah especially rewards martyrdom during the sacred month. So if you can kill some infidels and blow yourself up in the process, you will get a special reward from Muhammad.
You know, one interesting thing I just discovered about Apple products is on there you have a calendar, and you can set it to the Hebrew calendar, the Chinese calendar, the American calendar, or whatever, and it's supposed to put the dates of those cultures. Their holidays. Ramadan is on the Hebrew. The Muslim holidays are on the Hebrew calendar, the regular calendar, all of them, and they've removed, from what I've heard, I don't have Apple products, I think they've removed Good Friday and Easter. So this is strange.
Yeah. Well, they used to not have Good Friday, and I've got an iPhone, so I checked it out, and it was gone. They got enough blowback that they put it back on the at least on the Western calendar. The American calendar.
I bet Ramadan's on yours.
What's
strange is they even have it on the Hebrew calendar.
Yeah, put Ramadan on the Hebrew calendar. Go figure that. Yeah. All right, let's check it out.
Good Friday is back. It was gone for a while. But
okay, I'm not seeing Ramadan on this unless it started. When did Ramadan start?
Just last week.
Been a while since it's been there.
Just a minute.
May 16th, first day of Ramadan on the Apple calendar.
Yeah,
right there on the old iPhone. Okay, now here's the story that I want to spend the rest of this segment with, and then we'll take phone calls on the whole story about evolution that we just went through, and this story about the religion of Islam and how the West is capitulating this. Remember, I said that the quickest way to destroy a nation is through multiculturalism in religion, and that's where the UK is headed. In fact, I would suggest the point of my column is that Islam is now Britain's established religion. It is the religion above all others that the government in the UK favors, protects, and defends. Right now in the UK, you can offer any criticism you want of the Anglican Church. You can criticize it upside down. You can criticize it backwards and forwards. You can criticize it in Sanskrit. You can criticize it in Arabic, and nobody will bat an eye. That is absolutely fine. But you criticize Islam in any language, including Pig Latin, you will go to prison. That's the lesson out of the UK. And church attendance is way down in the UK. I've got an article. I had it in the stack for a while, never got a chance to use it. But talking about how participation in religious worship is at an all-time low in the Anglican Church in England, the official church of England. Attendance is down to like 3% of the population. So it's just virtually vanishing off the face of the map. But listen to this story out of the UK. Everybody thinks that the Anglican Church is the established church of the UK, but they're wrong. I mean, technically it might still be the established church, but the established church in England is Islam. The established religion is Islam. The most favored religion is Islam. The religion that gets the protection and the sanction and the support of the government is Islam. Now, it's become a crime, as I mentioned, in the UK to criticize the religion of the bloodthirsty Mohammed, despite, remember, we've been talking about this. There has been a blizzard over the last month or 6 weeks, a blizzard in the UK of knife attacks carried out by Muslims, acid attacks carried out by Muslims, and van attacks carried out by Muslims, by followers of what I call the religion of pieces. Well, that's what Bill Maher calls it, and he's exactly right. Now, here's the story of Tommy Robinson. Tommy Robinson is the founder of the English Defense League. He's no longer part of it, but he founded it, and he's one of Islam's staunchest truth-telling critics. Now, over the weekend, this is what happened to Tommy Robinson. He was broadcasting on Facebook, just like we're doing right now. He was broadcasting a live Facebook feed from a spot in front of the courthouse where a gang of Muslims that were running a sex trafficking ring in young girls. These Muslims, they pick off young girls, teenagers, and even pre-teenagers. They groom them. They use them for sexual purposes. They hand them around to everybody in the gang, and they sell them eventually into sex trafficking rings. Well, a group of them now are on trial. There was one gang in Rotherham, town of Rotherham, 1,400 girls they had kidnapped and seduced and put into this ring. And every one of these girls, all 1,400 of them, used and abused sexually by multiple Muslim men. And there was one social worker who tried to blow the whistle on the whole deal, and she was the one that was blamed. She was the one that got in trouble. She was the one that lost her job. She was the one that was prosecuted for defaming the religion of Islam, lost her job. And she was told by her superiors, look, we can't do that because we'll get tagged as Islamophobes. So they allowed these 1,400 innocent young girls in the UK to suffer brutal sexual assault and rape in order to protect their own reputations, in order to keep themselves from being branded as haters and Islamophobes. Now, what happened to Tommy Robinson is he was simply broadcasting. He wasn't doing anything. He wasn't hassling anybody. He didn't have a megaphone out there. He wasn't yelling at anybody. He wasn't waving his arms at anybody. He wasn't leading some kind of a protest. He was there by himself, broadcasting a Facebook stream live from the courthouse where these guys were being tried for the sexual abuse against young girls that they were guilty of. All of a sudden, the police show up, they grab him, they seize him, they throw him in the back of a police van, and they hustled him off to jail. And not only did they hustle him off to jail, but the court system there pulled him out of jail, put him on trial, convicted him, and sent him to prison for 13 months in a matter of hours. Not days, not months, but in a matter of hours. So he went from televising a live broadcast from the steps of this courthouse to being sentenced to prison in the space of about 2 hours. Didn't get any of his rights, wasn't allowed to have representation of a lawyer. Even rapists got more civil rights than Tommy Robinson was able to enjoy. And the court, after sentencing him to prison, I think my original version of the column said 13 years, it's 13 months. But after the judge sentenced Tommy Robinson to prison, he slapped a gag order on everybody in the UK so that no press outlet in the UK was allowed even to report on this story. So the authorities did not want anybody to find out what they had done to an English citizen who did nothing more than talk about this court trial of Muslim rapists. And for that, he was sentenced, without any representation, virtually instantaneously thrown into prison for 13 months. Now, he's been sent to Hull Prison. The problem with Hull Prison is that it is filled with Muslim gang members. You know what that means? Tommy Robinson is very likely to wind up dead before this week is out. Now, there's no First Amendment in the UK, and this episode shows exactly why the founders made sure there was one in the supreme law of the land. Every single American has the right to freedom of speech and the press, which is what Tommy Robinson was exercising. They are individual rights, not group rights. We'll come back and talk about the implications of that when we come back. Number to call, 888-589-8840.
Exposing Washington with Walker Wildman.
So who is responsible for the dysfunction in Washington? That's what we're going to be discussing today.
We have become one of the most litigious societies on the planet.
The goal of this show is to bring clarity to the news coming out of Washington, D.C., and to expose the deception that has plagued our nation's capital for decades.
Exposing Washington.
Each Saturday at 2:30 p.m. Central.
On American Family Radio.
It's quite all right for them to be dressed in white, fine linen, clean, because though they're in the Army, they don't have to do a blessed thing. All they have to do is watch, and when the Lord speaks, the war is over. I could be in on an army like that, right?
Join Dr. David Jeremiah for his series Escape the Coming Night, next time on Turning Point.
5:30 a.m. and 7 p.m. Central on American Family Radio.
Hi, this is Steve Tiber with 8 Days of Hope. We've been all over the country helping disaster victims who lose everything.
It's truly a blessing. I really don't have the words to express.
And yet they see a glimmer of hope when a volunteer shows up.
Building the home, that's the second reason we're here. The number one reason is to share the gospel and give them hope.
It's everything that's right in America. I mean, it really represents the best that we have to offer.
That's one of the main reasons for doing it, is being able to be the hands and feet of Jesus and coming out and working with so many wonderful volunteers.
I just feel like it's important in this day and age to teach a child how to serve.
Please go to our website, 8daysofhope.com, and click on Get Involved, submit your email address, and the next time we go anywhere with a disaster, we'll invite you to come along as well.
I love coming in the job room because you can see these pieces of paper. They aren't just a piece of paper. Right. It's a family that's hurting, and it's a gospel opportunity.
You know, I just thank God, for this moment. I mean, I'll be back in my home, and I know it's going to be awesome.
Come love others with 8 Days of Hope.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Welcome back to Focal Point. Brian Fisher is my name. Program is Focal Point, home of muscular Christianity on Conservative Talk Radio on the American Family Radio Network. Number to call if you want to jump in our conversation about origins, evolution and creation, what we're learning from science, or about what happened to Tommy Robinson in the UK, where he was thrown into prison for 13 months with no representation, no opportunity to mount a defense, because he had done nothing more than broadcast a Facebook live feed from the courthouse where Muslim rapists were being tried. Now, there's no First Amendment, as I mentioned, in the UK, and this is the reason. What we're seeing here is exactly why there is one in our Constitution, because the founders knew what the Crown had done back in the day. They did not want that repeated. They did not want guys like Tommy Robinson being hauled off the street and sent to prison in a matter of 2 hours. They were not going to let that happen in the United States of America. So every individual has freedom of speech rights and freedom of the press. Freedom of the press, by the way, is an individual right. It is not a group right. People think that newspapers and televisions have the right to freedom of the press. That is not true. The reason they have a right to freedom of the press is that every single individual that works for them does. Everybody that works for that newspaper has the individual constitutional right to freedom of the press. So a newspaper made up of a whole bunch of those people, the newspaper has it because every individual in it does. But the freedom of the press plank was not written for newspapers or television. It was written for individual Americans such as myself. So bloggers and columnists who post their own stuff online, they have absolutely every bit as much of a constitutional right to the freedom of the press as the New York Times and the Washington Post. So that's why our founders said we need to put a protection for freedom of speech. That's what he was exercising, his freedom of speech, his freedom of the press, so we don't have people hauled off the streets and thrown into prison with no representation and no defense. All right, number again to call is 888-589-8840. Let's play two quick Tommy Robinson clips. This is the guy that's now in prison for 13 months. Here is Tommy Robinson. He's a truth teller about Islam. That's what he's getting in trouble for, is telling the truth about Islam. Here is clip R1.
The Prophet Muhammad was an Islamist. He enforced Islam. He spread it with fear and terror. He actually, a quote from Muhammad, "I have been made victorious with terror." Okay, he's not a man of peace. This man that all Muslims hold up as the moral compass, yeah, this man murdered. He raped. He pillaged. That's why we have a problem. And of course, the majority of Muslims don't take it literal. The majority of Muslims don't pick up the Quran. The majority of Muslims don't go to the mosque. The majority. When you have an extreme literal interpretation, we have a huge problem.
All right, so he's saying, look, not all Muslims believe not all Muslims believe every verse in the Quran. And we can thank God that they do not. It's a minority of Muslims that believe all the verses in the Quran about violence against infidels. There's like 109 of them in there. And here, clip R2, here is some of the violence that Tommy Robinson experienced before he was arrested on Friday in his recent career.
You are denigrating a whole community over and over again. It's been made very, very clear by the leadership within your organisation. This is about all Muslims. This is about Islam, not Islamism, and I'm sure you can even define Islamism.
I've grown up in Luton. Some of the best people I've met through growing up are Muslim. Some of my mates are Muslim. You had Butch Vassell on this show last week. I was out with his son on Thursday night, okay? I don't hate all Muslims. Muslims are the first victims of Islam and extremist Islam. That's what's happening. I don't hate Muslims at all. And I've said that from day one. When it comes to peddling hate, you just said you've been threatened on Twitter. Okay, well, I've had an armed guard for my family for a week. I've had threats to decapitate my children's head. I've been in hospital with bruising on the brain. I've had 8 stitches in my lip. I get confronted and attacked on a weekly basis. So I don't need anyone to tell me about being threatened.
All right, so he says, look, the first victims of radical Islam are Muslims because they're the closest ones at hand. Okay, Tommy Robinson, 13 months. Let's grab a call. Let's begin with Tony in Dallas, Texas. Tony, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Hey, how you doing? I'm a first-time caller. I've been listening to your show for a while.
Great. Thanks for calling.
Thank you for bringing. Yes, definitely. Thank you for bringing this to my attention in regards to Tommy Robinson. That's really appalling what's going on with him. It's terrible. And I'm grateful to live here in the U.S. of A. that we can have these rights to speak our minds and not be worried about being thrown into prison. I actually had something similar happen to me. I was working in a school district, and I reported unethical conduct, which was sexual harassment. And they did not give me the time of day. They basically, in a matter of months, kicked me out of the school, and I lost my career. So, in a way, I really relate with this Tommy Robinson person because it's just completely unfair. And I was just listening to you while I was waiting. I actually work with a Muslim, and I preached the gospel to him. I shared with him. And you are right. Not a lot, or at least the persons that I heard speaking, not a lot of Muslims actually read or look into their faith or their religion. They just go on day by day, living their lives, and it's just kind of sad. I'm like, hey, I thought you would practice these kinds of things and not just talk about it. Like, well, anyways, that's my comment. I'm just going to call in and chime in.
Okay, Tony, thank you for that. You know, and what Tony's talking about is not unexampled right now in our modern culture, where people who complain about sexual harassment often are the ones that get in trouble. The complaints are not taken seriously. You know, it finally blew up with this Harvey Weinstein thing, but that guy's been a bad actor for years. People have been complaining about him for years, and nothing was done. And the people that complained were tagged as the bad actress. Let's go to Jim in Columbus, Mississippi. Jim, welcome. What's on your mind?
Long time, Brian.
Hey.
I think it's a terrible misnomer that even Christians hold to, is that all religions have constitutional standing, and that we're boxed in by the First Amendment. Because no matter what it is, your religion, you have a constitutional right to protect it. And I think that sidesteps the preamble of the Constitution, because whatever religion gets to enjoy constitutional standing has to be reasonably balanced against those principles in the preamble, which are biblical principles. And we leapfrog right over it.
Yeah.
But it is the qualifier of what goes on in the Constitution.
Yeah. Well, you know, and you're right about that, Jim. And you think about the founders. I mean, I've talked about this before, but Joseph Story, most renowned historian of the Constitution, and he's got a very illuminating section in his book, Commentaries on the Constitution, on the First Amendment. You know, and he says, look, the real object of the First Amendment was not to countenance, not even to consider Islam, which he called Mohammedanism, or Hinduism, or Judaism, or infidelity, by which he meant atheism. It wasn't even to consider them. Its sole object was to exclude rivalry among the various Christian sects, S-E-C-T-S, or denominations. That was the whole purpose, so they wouldn't be competing for who could become the official church of the United States. That's why Congress was prohibited from picking one church and making it the established church of the United States. So Jim is right. You know, it's been my contention for a long time that no religion other than Christianity has a claim on First Amendment rights because it's not written about them. That's a matter, the founders said, including Thomas Jefferson, whatever happens with religion is a matter for the states to regulate. They can regulate religion any way they want to, but the issue of religious practice is off limits for the federal government. They're not supposed to intervene in any way with the free exercise of the Christian faith. Let's go to Mary in Iowa. Mary, welcome. What's on your mind?
Well, I was listening to about Tommy Robinson in England.
Yes.
And isn't the mayor of London a practicing Muslim?
That is exactly right. So he is, and under his watch, you've had this spike in acid attacks, which is a uniquely Muslim form of assault. You have a spike in knife attacks, which is a uniquely Muslim form of attack. And you have a spike in van attacks, people driving vehicles over infidels. Right. That's a uniquely Muslim form. And that's all happened under Sadiq Khan's watch.
That's what I wondered, if this was stemming from this, what else could it be?
Well, you know, and I think what's happened, I'm not saying he's responsible for it, but he, as a Muslim, he's certainly shown favoritism toward the Islamic faith. And you can imagine Muslims think that they've got some kind of protection, some kind of umbrella where they can carry out the darkest parts of their faith, and they'll have a friend in City Hall. Let's go to David in Tyler, Texas. David, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Hey, Brian, it's a great day. Hillary's not president. How are you?
Good. You're right. You imagine doing this show if she was president? Yikes. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing that scientific article to our attention. And since I'm not on Facebook, I'll look for your post tomorrow. If you can include the reference, I think that any of us who are concerned about education should get a copy of that article, take it to our local public school boards, and ask them to include this in the science curriculum, that it be taught. This is powerful, exactly what you said. This is powerful.
You know, and David, I think what you're suggesting there, getting this in the hands of teachers, is a fantastic idea. What I would encourage you to do, if you have a science teacher at your junior high or your high school, drop by the school, see if you can get 5 minutes with them and just give them the article to read. Ask them to read the article. Don't lecture them, don't harangue them, don't pressure them, but just ask them if as a favor to you, they would be willing to read this article and maybe spend a few minutes chatting about it. Could be part of their ongoing education, because believe me, what's in this article, they are not hearing that anywhere. The only place they're liable to hear it would be from you and me. Well, that's it for the first hour. You're listening to Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. We'll be back after the news. Do not go anywhere. And ladies and gentlemen, do not doubt this book. Be right back.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
1milliondads.com is where men can learn and grow together as men of the cross. Close families and even national revival begin at home with strong fathers in the faith. Go to the website, read the articles. You're not alone. 1milliondads.com. Lead, or others will.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. Forecasters say Alberto has weakened to a tropical depression but could still claim lives as heavy rains bring flash floods across the southeast. The heaviest rains were centered on Alabama early today, and spots from Tennessee to the Carolinas were getting a good soaking. 2 television journalists out covering the weather were killed Monday by a falling tree. President Trump heads to Nashville today. Jessica Rosenthal has more on why.
President Trump is making his 3rd trip to Nashville since becoming president to headline a rally/fundraiser for Congresswoman Marsha Blackburn, the Republicans running for Senator Bob Corker's soon-to-be vacant seat. Tennessee went for President Trump over Hillary Clinton by more than 25 points, yet polls for Blackburn have varied. While the primary is not till August, the race does appear to be at this point between her and former Tennessee Governor Phil Bredesen, and some polls have the Democrat beating Blackburn. A poll 2 months ago found him popular with independents and even some Republicans. So in a Senate where Republicans only have a 2-seat majority, the race is being closely watched. Jessica Rosenthal, Fox News.
A law firm is fighting the Southern Poverty Law Center on its home turf. More from Chris Woodward.
The National Center for Life and Liberty is representing D. James Kennedy Ministries, which attorney David Gibbs III says have been castigated and defamed by the Southern Poverty Law Center as a hate group.
The Southern Poverty Law Center puts that tag on certain ministries that they disagree with, and then there's negative consequences to that. So we are also in court against Amazon, which is denying equal services to the ministry because of this designation.
Gibbs urges people to pray about today's hearing, which is scheduled for the U.S. District Court in Alabama, not far from where the Southern Poverty Law Center is headquartered.
The consequences of this litigation could be extremely important for generations to come. We believe that if nonprofit churches, faith-based organizations, ministries that believe the Bible can be castigated in this way, that this will be the beginning where the government could deny their tax-exempt status, where other internet providers could ban them for Facebook, social media, Google searches, where literally we're fighting for churches and ministries to be treated fairly and equally on the internet and to have their rights protected. I've often said this would not be a front of the bus or a back of the bus, to use the famous civil rights analogy, but the question is, will Bible-believing individuals even be allowed a seat on the bus?
I'm Chris Woodward.
You might think President Trump is far too busy to read a note from you, but you might be wrong.
Did you know President Trump takes time every day in the Oval Office to pray? Tracy Bost found out that fact in an amazing way. Shortly after the 2016 election, she went to a conference that the president was attending.
There was so much chaos outside of the retreat center where the president was, the newly elected president. And there were 600 rioters. It was just awful.
A thought occurred to her.
We prayed as Christians that God would change the election, that God would open up a door for someone else to be elected, someone that he chose above all else.
That person deserves our prayers. So Bost started a campaign to put prayers on 3x5 cards and send them to the White House via her congressman husband, Mike Bost of Illinois. That was the end of that, she thought, until
my husband got the opportunity to be with the signing of the energy bill in the Oval Office. And when they introduced their names or themselves, Mike's name was called. The president instantly put together Mike Bost, Illinois, wife, prayer cards. And he said, they're right over there on the shelf. And they brought in the original bag, and he said, we use these every day. He said, we look forward to it. And he said, they're such a blessing. He said, Vice President Pence came right up to me and said, he really does. We really do use these every day, sometimes more than once a day. Depends on the day.
Now she's giving you the opportunity to get your prayer in the president's hands. Go to frontlinefamilies.org and click on the Encourage Prayer link. I'm Steve Jordahl.
And that's American Family News for this hour, available online at onenewsnow.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download the One News Now mobile app. I'm Rusty Pugh.
You wish you could stop thinking about it, but you can't. It never quite leaves your thoughts. Even in the joyful moments, it's there. The sadness, shame, and sorrow. You know you can't go on like this, so don't. Phone the International Helpline for Abortion Recovery at 866-482-LIFE. Your call is confidential, and you'll be talking with someone who's already been where you are and found the way out. 866-482-LIFE.
You can't call me a racist or fascist for picking out problems within the Islamic ideology.
Good economic news is starting to break through. If you looked 6 months ago, you would say it was doomsday for Republicans.
If you are born black and you don't accept your natural status as a victim, then the validity of your blackness is immediately called into question.
Some people say, well, taxes are regressive, but in this case, yes, they are. That's the good thing about them, because the problem is in people that don't have a lot of money. And so higher taxes should have a bigger impact on their behavior and how they deal with themselves.
The fastest growing political parties in every single country in Europe are anti-Islamist political parties. Whether you like it or not, it's happening.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged.
An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Hi, and welcome back to the second hour of Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Focal Point is the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio. Also the home of high definition radio. More content per cubic inch of air than any other place on your dial. It is the home of ethanol-free radio. Nothing but high octane fuel here on the USS Focal Point. Glad to have you in the conversation. However you happen to be listening to us or catching us, you could be live streaming us on Facebook, live streaming us on YouTube, and both places, Facebook and YouTube, you can catch up to the program. If you miss it, you can go to our YouTube channel, subscribe there, click the little bell button, and it'll give you a reminder when we're ready to go live. But you can catch the program in its entirety afterwards if you happen to miss it because of work or whatever. Also, if you go back to find it on our Facebook page, you'll get an extensive table of contents to help you navigate every day's program. You could be listening on one of our 184 stations that comprise the American Family Radio Network. You could be audio streaming us live at afr.net, listening to us through the computer. You might be using apps for the iPhone or for the Android, listen on the go, and you may be listening to us on one of our podcasts. I encourage you to do that. Podcasts are readily available. In fact, if you go to the Focal Point Facebook page, you can just click on the Learn More button on the banner, take you right to the podcast page. We are very glad that you are in the conversation. Here's another winnable war moment. I've got an article here from the Washington Times. Actually, it's Associated Press, talking about the number of Christian legal organizations that are gaining influence under Donald Trump. This is a winnable war moment. It profiles First Liberty. Our good friend Kelly Shackelford has been a guest on this program many times, as other attorneys on First Liberty have been guests on this program. They're now gaining a bigger profile, wider influence under President Trump. This is a winnable war moment. This would not be happening, trust me, under Hillary Clinton. You've also got a nice little mention of Alliance Defending Freedom in this article. Liberty Counsel, our good friend Matt Staver is head of Liberty Counsel. You have the Beckett Organization, American Center for Law and Justice. All of them get a mention in this article about their increasing influence. Here's what it says, second paragraph, a piece by Paul Weber. At First Liberty Law Firm, their attorneys have moved into powerful taxpayer-funded jobs at the Texas Attorney General's office. They have advised President Donald Trump, who nominated a current and former First Liberty lawyer to lifetime appointments on federal courts. Another attorney went to the Department of Health and Human Services as a senior advisor on religious freedom. couple paragraphs down. Since 2015, First Liberty and a conservative Christian law firm, the Alliance Defending Freedom, have moved prominent lawyers to top jobs in attorney general's offices in Texas and elsewhere. Their influence is widening under the Trump administration. Their work includes a pending U.S. Supreme Court case involving a Colorado baker who refused to make a cake for a same-sex couple. That ruling is going to be issued, that opinion is going to be issued sometime in the very near future. Another case involving a rural Texas high school. Their cheerleaders were prohibited from putting inspirational Bible verses on the banners during games. And their case will be before the Supreme Court. That ruling going to be issued before too long. The organizations have drafted bills that have been introduced by Republicans in state legislatures, so they've been very effective, very busy, and very prominent. So anyway, good news on the legal front with our good friends at First Liberty, Alliance Defending Freedom, the Beckett Fund for Religious Liberty, American Center for Law and Justice, and Liberty Counsel with our good friend Matt Staver. So that's winnable war moment for those involved in the legal arena. Let's see, anything else I want to mention here? Just the cases that are coming up in the Supreme Court, they're going to issue them sometime in the month of June, usually issue one major ruling a week. Partisan gerrymandering is going to be an opinion they're going to issue. That may not be a matter to many people in the listening audience, but it is an important issue because you have a lot of these legislators that'll draw congressional districts trying to make sure that a Democrat wins that seat or trying to make sure that a Republican wins that seat, a pox on both their houses. This is not how congressional districts ought to be drawn up. They ought to be drawn up as fairly and impartially as possible. Get this gerrymandering business out of there. Use natural boundaries and geographical lines. Keep cities together, keep counties together if you possibly can, and just cluster them together in equal portions so that the districts have the same amount of voters in them. Again, that issue on whether Christian bakers can protect their rights of conscience when they're asked to bake a cake that communicates a message with which they disagree, that's going to be decided by the Supreme Court. Donald Trump's travel ban is going to be revisited. I think the Supreme Court is liable to uphold his travel ban because they did so. They allowed it to go into effect in December, and they sounded ready to uphold it when they took oral arguments on this back in April. And there'll be another issue on pregnancy centers and abortion. California is trying to compel pregnancy centers, Christian pro-life pregnancy centers, to communicate the message that the state of California provides free or low-cost abortions for eligible women. That's not a message they want to communicate. It violates their conscience to do it. And the Supreme Court will be ruling this month on whether it is permissible for California to engineer that kind of manufactured speech, that kind of compelled speech. Here's hoping that the Supreme Court will rule in favor of freedom of speech and their freedom to decide what message they want to communicate and what they don't. You know, an update from the world of gay rights. You're familiar with the case of Bradley Manning. He goes now by the name Chelsea Manning. We've talked about the fact that transgenders, one of the pathologies associated with transgenderism is suicidal ideation and suicidal acts. 41% of people that go through the complete transgender process, I mean the hormones, the surgical mutilation, the whole bit, they attempt suicide. 30% of them succeed. Now, Bradley Manning attempted to commit suicide twice when he was in U.S. military lockup, and over the weekend he sent a photo of himself on his Twitter account standing on the ledge of an upper story in a building, and with the message, "I'm sorry," and which followed a tweet that said, "I'm not really cut out for this world." Both of those messages and the picture indicating he was dealing with suicidal ideation. And again, this is one of the pathologies associated with transgenderism. 41% of them attempt suicide, 30% succeed. Now, he deleted the text about 10 minutes after they went up, but they went up. No question that that's something that is on his mind. That's Bradley Manning. He was the one that leaked 700,000 military and State Department documents, and Barack Obama commuted his 35-year sentence to just a few months, back in 2.
Are you a responsible person who finds yourself growing deeper and deeper in credit card debt and you're not sure how to fix the problem? Then get ready for a toll-free number that will put you on a path to financial recovery. Trinity Debt Management is a nonprofit organization that will consolidate your accounts into one easy-to-manage monthly payment, put a stop to late fees and over-limit charges, and reduce your interest rates by as much as 60%. You'll save thousands and become debt-free for keeps. It's not a loan. It's a smart way to relieve your stress, meet your obligations, and preserve your self-respect. If your debt has you down, we should talk. Gather up your bills and call this toll-free number for a free, no-obligation debt analysis. 1-800-788-1813. That's 1-800-788-1813. If you're in debt and you need help, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813.
Hi, I'm David Barton, founder of Wall Builders.
And I'm Tim Barton, the president of Wall Builders. And we want to let you know about an opportunity this summer for 18 to 25-year-olds to come be a part of what we're calling the Leadership Training Program. Actually, the website is wallbuilders.com/leadership training if you want to see more information. But really what we're doing is trying to help young people combat a lot of the nonsense they're learning in academia, things that are anti-American or anti the Bible. And so we actually dig into the Bible, we dig into American history and the Constitution and education, and try to give a really good inoculation against some of the things that they're hearing in academics.
Yeah, Tim, you're exactly right. This is such an excellent opportunity to have the apologetics of the things that they'll face in academia and the culture. So if you're from 18 to 25 years old and you want training in this, and by the way, you get to actually hold the handwritten documents of George Washington and John Adams and other aspects of American history, this is a great opportunity this summer. 2 weeks. Go to wallbuilders.com/leadership training. Hope to see you this summer.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Welcome back. Brian Fisher here. Focal Point, the program. Network is American Family Radio Network. Got a message on Facebook. Jeff told me he monitors that during the program. An individual indicating he'd printed off the article on evolution. Remember the one that says that all living things came into being at about the same time. Their timeline is way off, but that's not the important thing. The article produced a result of a study produced by 2 scientists said that all living things came into being at the same time, which is exactly what the Bible says in Genesis 1. Also says there are clearly marked genetic boundaries between the species. There's no evidence of one species slowly transforming or morphosing into another species. Clearly marked boundaries, no transitional forms, no transitional fossils, no intermediate forms, no missing links. Exactly what we find in the Bible, which says they reproduced each one after its own kind.
And if anybody does want to find that article and share it with friends or print it off, it's right at the Focal Point with Brian Fisher Facebook page. Yeah.
So Focal Point with Brian Fisher right on the Facebook page. You can grab the link there if you'd like. Now let's grab clip number 1. This is a guy by the name of Sean Trendy. This guy is a guru when it comes to election dynamics and trends. He's a pretty smart fella. So I read most of what he writes. We got an election coming up in November. And remember, all we've heard from the Democrats is blue wave, blue wave, blue wave. You even had some Republicans out there moaning and wringing their hands over the coming blue wave. We're going to be swamped, largely, these Republicans say, because Trump is such an ogre. So they say it's all is lost. We're going to be inundated with a blue wave in November. And I've never believed that from Jump Street when you look at what's happening in the economy. You look at the fact that Donald Trump's popularity numbers have not gone into the basement, which is what the Democrats have been trying to do since he got elected, still hovering between 40 and 50%, depends on which poll you look at. But now here's Sean Trendy. He's on Fox News here, And he talks here about what is liable to be coming in November.
There's a couple things going on. I think the good economic news is starting to break through. I think people are starting to question where the Mueller investigation is going. I think it had kept the president down for a while. And I think the tax cuts energized the Republican base and are playing a role in the president's improving fortunes.
Now, traditionally, it is about 23-24 seats change hands in these midterm elections. Aside from the environment we're in, how do you factor in this environment now?
Well, I think if you looked 6 months ago, you would say it was doomsday for Republicans, with the president down in the mid-30s and the generic ballot, which asks who you would prefer to control Congress, showing a double-digit lead for Democrats. But that's just not the world we're in today. The president is up into the low to mid-40s in his job approval. This generic ballot has closed to a 4-point lead for the Democrats. So I think we've gone from Democrats being heavy favorites to take the House to something of a dead heat and maybe even a little bit of thumb on the scale for the Republicans.
So Sean Trendy is saying this blue wave has turned into a dead heat, which may indicate very little change in the makeup of Congress as a result of the election. Good economic news. We've reported it for you here. Unemployment rates at historic lows, both for Hispanics and blacks as well as for whites. Dow continues to be up and so forth. So the economic news is good. A lot of people wondering about the Mueller investigation. It's spinning its wheels and getting ready to spin out, in my judgment. And so Trendy says, look, things are a lot different now than they were 6 months ago. You might have thought the Republicans were in trouble then, but they're not in trouble right now as we look at the facts on the ground. Even the generic ballot, which historically has always substantially favored the Democrats, is now almost a dead heat, maybe a 4-point lead for the Democratic Party. Now, here is Sean Trendy's second comment, clip 2.
I think it's a real concern for the Democrats. They have this top 2 primary system where everyone runs in the top 2 in the same race, and the top 2 make it to the election. There's a lot of Democrats running in some of these races. They could divide the Democratic vote, and you could end up with 2 Republicans in the general election shutting the Democrats out, which is sort of a nightmare scenario for Democrats.
Now, what Sean Trendy is talking about here is the state of California. They have a primary system where everybody runs in the same race. So you don't have a Democratic primary and a Republican primary. Regardless of what party you are, if you want to run for that seat, everybody's name gets thrown into the same hat and into the rabbit's hat. Everybody's name gets thrown into the same rabbit's hat, and then whoever's name gets pulled out of the rabbit's hat becomes the nominee. So everybody's name is on the ballot. Now, here's the problem. There are a lot more Democrats in California that want to run for office than Republicans. So you might have only 2 Republicans on a ballot, and you might have 9 Democrats. What happens is the 9 Democrats, they might wind up dividing all of the Democratic primary votes, and so the 2 Republicans wind up winning the top 2 spots, because there's only 2 of them on the ballot when there's 9 Democrats. And that's the nightmare scenario for the Democrats. They might have completely outsmarted themselves and wind up shutting themselves out of their own elections. Now, here's a piece of, this is kind of amazing. This is Michael Bloomberg. You don't often hear this kind of transparent stupidity on the air. When I have people looking for sound bites from me or whatever, I say, look, I want to find, give me sound bites of a liberal saying something stupid, or a liberal saying something smart, or a Republican saying something brilliant, or a conservative.
Which one of those do you think is the hardest for us to find?
Well, probably a conservative saying something brilliant. I'm guessing the easiest thing to find would be a liberal saying something stupid. No, I'd be a liberal saying something smart.
Yes, that's right.
I don't even ask for a liberal saying something brilliant. That's the standard for conservatives. But anyway, here is Michael Bloomberg, and what this reveals. Listen to this carefully, because this reveals, it pulls the cover back on the way in which liberals see the purpose of taxing us to death. This is Michael Bloomberg. Let's listen.
Some people say, well, taxes are regressive, but in this case, yes, they are. That's the good thing about them, because the problem is in people that don't have a lot of money. And so higher taxes should have a bigger impact on their behavior and how they deal with themselves. So I listen to people saying, oh, we don't want to tax the poor. Well, we want the poor to live longer so that they can get an education and enjoy life. And that's why you do want to do exactly what a lot of people say you don't want to do. The question is, do you want to pander to those people, or do you want to get them to live longer? And there's just no question. If you raise taxes on full sugary drinks, for example, they will drink less, and there's just no question that full sugar drinks are one of the major contributors to obesity, and obesity is one of the major contributors to heart disease and cancer and a variety of other things.
So it's regressive, it is good. There are lots of tax experts in the room and fiscal experts, and I'm very pleased that they hear you say that. And they all say the two things in life which are absolutely certain. One is death, the other one is tax. So you use one to defer the other one.
That's correct.
Okay.
That is exactly right. Well said.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I mean, the cover just got peeled back. If you don't remember any other soundbite from the history of Focal Point since we started, we're coming up on our 9th anniversary on July 6th. Remember this one. This is Michael Bloomberg telling you that the way liberals see the purpose of taxes is not to raise revenue for the proper functions of government. That's the way you and I look at taxes. The government has certain legitimate functions. A lot of what it does is not legitimate, but it has certain legitimate functions, running a system of justice, providing for legislators to formulate policies for us, providing a military to protect us. And for all of those legitimate functions of government, we need to collect taxes. That's the way we look at it. This is how we provide for the legitimate functions. That is not the way liberals look at taxes. The purpose of taxation is to control behavior. Did you get that? Yeah. The purpose of taxation, according to Michael Bloomberg, is to control behavior. And he says we have a better chance of controlling the behavior of poor people because they have less money. So if we raise their taxes, it pinches them more. They've got less money to spend on stuff that we have decided is unhealthy for them, and so they'll stay away from it. They'll make better choices, and therefore they will live longer. I mean, it's a ridiculous theory because it doesn't work. But I mean, ladies and gentlemen, this is so revealing about what the left is all about when it comes to taxes. It's about punishing people who aren't making the decisions that they think people ought to make, and it's about providing an incentive for people to make the decisions that liberals want them to make. It's about controlling behavior. Remember, they don't think that you and I are smart enough to run our own lives, so they want to control our lives. They want to dictate the choices, even when it comes to pop. They want to control our choices when it comes to soda pop, as they used to say, whether you buy Dr. Pepper or whether you drink water or whatever. They want to control that. They don't want you drinking sugary drinks that taste good and all that kind of stuff because they think it'll shorten your lifespan. It's ridiculous because it doesn't work, but that's their theory. So anyway, that's just amazing. So Michael Bloomberg saying, look, raising taxes on poor people is a great idea because they have the least money to be able to satisfy the tax burden, so we can control their behavior more easily and more readily. And I don't know about you, but I find that absolutely perfectly revealing and absolutely and perfectly obscene. And one of the things this tells me, ladies and gentlemen, these people, liberals, progressives, regressives, Democrats, these people should not be in charge of anything because they do not know what they are doing. They think they're smarter than you and me, and they have a right to run our lives. All right, when we come back after the break, we're going to talk a little bit about the update in the Mueller investigation, what's going on with that. And we've got couple of clips from Candace Owens. Remember, Candace Owens was that black woman that Kanye West really liked. And he was retweeting stuff that Candace Owens, who is a black conservative, said. And Kanye West took all kinds of heat for retweeting the things that Candace Owens had said. Well, we'll hear from Candace Owens about what she is about, and it's just classic, old-fashioned American self-reliance, initiative, independence, education, refusal to blame other people, work hard, take advantage of opportunities, and make your own way in the world. You're going to love it. We'll get up to speed with all that when we come back. Focal Point, American Family Radio. We'll be right back.
A charitable gift annuity through the AFA Foundation is an excellent way to provide yourself with guaranteed permanent income while at the same time supporting the American Family Association. Here's what one supporter told us.
I very much want to see God's Word continue into the next generation. This is a way I can help AFA spread the truth and promote their biblical stand. My experience with the AFA Foundation continues to remind me that I have a small part in helping AFA in the battle for our nation's values.
Financial planning is essential to your family. A charitable gift annuity through the AFA Foundation is one way you can support AFA and the health of our nation. The planners at the AFA Foundation are here to help you do the most with your finances. You can call us at 800-326-4543, extension 345, find us on Facebook, or email foundation@afa.net. and learn whether a charitable gift annuity is right for you.
Okay, here's the big question with regard to any big decision. Is this going to work? Well, if you've heard about MediShare, a brilliant way of sharing healthcare costs, you may have wondered that, yeah, but does it actually work? So did Dr. Stuart Hoover, who initially joined to save a lot of money. The typical family saves about $500 a month. Stuart saved even more.
When we first joined MediShare, we were immediately going from a little over $1,600 a month down to $460 basically a month.
So that's wonderful, but then his wife needed emergency surgery. The bills added up to $160,000.
So we were seeing the bills coming in, and then the bills were being paid. Portions were being shared, and the end result of this is this bill was taken care of.
Yes, MediShare works, and it's so easy to get your questions answered. Why not? You can call right now. Just hit **345. That's **345, **345.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Video segments of today's program will be posted at afr.net and on the Focal Point Facebook page. You'll also find the best collection of Brian's resources on our Facebook page. If you're on Twitter, be among the very first every morning to find out what the day's show will be about. Just follow Brian at Brian J. Fisher. Brian J. Fisher.
Howdy, Brian Fisher here. Program is Focal Point on the American Family Radio Network. Going back to that Michael Bloomberg clip, which was so absolutely stunningly revealing that yes, taxes on the poor are regressive. A regressive tax means it hurts the poor more than it hurts the rich. So he admits raising taxes on the poor is regressive, and that's what's good about them, because poor people have less money, so raising their taxes will have a bigger impact on their behavior. That's a direct quote. Higher taxes should have a bigger impact on their behavior. I listen to people saying we don't want to tax the poor. Well, we want the poor to live longer, so we have to tax them more to keep them from making decisions that we, the brightest people in the room, believe are not in their best interest. And he says, he says, do you want to pander to these people, or do you want them to get them to make choices that will enable them to live longer? So notice that Michael Bloomberg believes that allowing poor people to keep more of their own money is pandering to them. That if you want the poor to keep more of what they earn, you are pandering to them. You don't care about poor people. We do, because we're taxing them to death so they can't afford to make any decisions other than the ones that we will allow them to make. All right, so that's what's going on out there. That's just crazy stuff. A couple other things before we get back into some sound bites. I don't know if you remember this. Let's see, who came out? Sony. They came out with the robot dogs. Do you remember that? They came out with robot dogs in 1999. They were called Aibos or Abos. AIBO, short for Artificial Intelligence Robot. 1999, they made these and marketed them. They sold 3,000 units at an initial cost of $3,000 in today's money. Those 3,000 units sold out in 20 minutes. Now, it never really took off. So in 2006, Sony canceled production. They'd sold 150,000 of those robot dogs over the course of 7 years. Now, but when they stopped making them, people that had these robot dogs realized that the day is going to come when my robot dog is going to die because the parts are going to wear out, and if they're not making anymore, we're not going to be able to get replacement parts. And the only way they could repair one of these robot dogs was plunder another robot dog. They even had later models that actually talk to you, a talking robot dog. Now, here is the deal. Because of the upgrades they made where they would have human-like mannerisms, even including speech, they'd wag their tails, they'd come when they were called, and all that, people got attached to their robot dogs. They got humanly attached to their robot dogs to the point where when their robot dog died, they grieved and they mourned. And so a Buddhist priest decided to start offering robot dog funerals. So he's been doing funerals for robot dogs for a number of years. When they cannibalize parts from other defunct dogs, you know what they call those parts and those animals? They are organ donors. So there you have it.
Wow. Funerals
for robot dogs. So anyway, that started in 2015. And the services include chanting and the burning of incense. You know what they do in these Hindu or Buddhist, whatever this is. I don't know which it is. Let's see if I can figure this out. Where does it say? Anyway, Buddhist. In Buddhism, they will leave like food and stuff for people that die as part of the funeral. You know what they leave in front of these robot dogs? A pair of pliers that they can take with them into the afterlife. So anyway, the priest says, defending doing funerals for robot dogs, he says there's a saying, everything has a Buddha nature. All right, so that's the latest from Japan and the Buddhism. All right, let's talk about this Mueller investigation. Clip number 4. Remember, James Clapper has gotten into a whole lot of trouble because he admitted, number one, that there were spies, a spy, at least one, in the Trump campaign. He admitted it. We call them informants. You might call them a spy, but they're there. So Clapper blew the lid off of that thing. Yes, we did have an informant in the Trump campaign under President Obama. Never put one in the Hillary campaign because we didn't care about Hillary as much as we cared about Trump. Remember their first story, we were just trying to protect Trump. We knew that the Russians were trying to mess with him, mess with his campaign. We did not want to see that happen to Donald Trump because we had so much affection and so much care for him, so much concern for him. We didn't want to see the Russians mess with his campaign, so we put an informant in there to make sure the Russians couldn't get away with it. Now this is his latest explanation for why they had a spy in the Trump campaign, clip 4.
First thing is determine just what was going on. If there wasn't a concern about the Russians, and that could be allayed, then perhaps no reason to do that. The FBI has rules and protocols on when they decide to do things like that, and I don't think at that point that it reached the point where it would be appropriate to engage, with the head of the campaign.
So what he's talking about here is the question that people ask. All right, if you had a spy in the Trump campaign because you were worried about Russian interference with his campaign, why did you not tell him? Why didn't you tell the guy whose campaign could be affected by that? And Clapper just passes it off. Well, it just hadn't got to that point yet. We've got protocols. When things get to a certain temperature, that's when we inform the candidate, which is just hooey. Now, clip number 5, this is Britt Hume talking with Martha MacCallum. Remember, the left, in order to sustain their narrative, they got to believe that the Russians were able to control the outcome of the election. And James Clapper said that they did, and the only way they could influence the election was by buying ads on Facebook. Let's listen to Brett Hume talking to Martha McCallum.
I worry about a man who was once considered a serious intelligence analyst reaching that conclusion, because, you know, all the deep dives that have been done into what the Russians did during the election have indicated, yeah, they tried, but what they spent and what they did was utterly dwarfed by all the other efforts, all the other spending, all the other advertising, all the other messaging, all the other campaigning that was done on both sides of that campaign. And it seems unbelievable that someone could come to the conclusion that what the Russians did, not as big as they wanted it to be, perhaps, but they thought was big, but it was actually minuscule.
Yeah,
that could have made the difference. It's just not plausible.
Just not plausible that the Russians could have affected the campaign through Facebook. Facebook went back and researched the amount of money that the Russians spent on Facebook ads, and Britt Hume is exactly right. Absolutely minuscule. Wouldn't have made a dent. Wouldn't have made a ripple in the stream. Completely ineffective. Utterly a waste of Russian money, and they didn't even spend that very much money. So he says this idea that the Russians affected the campaign through Facebook, which is the only way they had to do it, is just not plausible. Now, Jonathan Turley's been one of our go-to guys on this whole thing. This is clip number 6, and he's talking about this business of the Obama administration. Remember, this is Obama now, putting a spy in the campaign of a political candidate. Clip 6.
We now find out that the Obama administration put the opposing campaign's presidential candidate or his campaign under investigation. That raises legitimate questions. If this was, the Bush administration investigating the Obama campaign, I would think there'd be a lot of Democrats saying, we want to know. And so I just find this really odd, the idea that we shouldn't get the answer, as we're going to get, from the Inspector General. Now, at the end of the day, we're not going to come together as a country as long as both sides are trying to shut down investigations. I think the public is growing a little tired with partisans sort of filtering all of these issues. I think what the public wants is a full record that they can reach conclusions from. And for those people that voted for Trump, and even those people who did not, to suggest that a campaign like this was under investigation of both surveillance and possible informants or spies goes to the heart of our electoral system.
All right. So he says, look, this raises legitimate questions about any administration, but starting here with the Obama administration, any administration deliberately spying on the campaign of an American political candidate. Just ominous, and he is exactly right about that. Here's Turley's second clip, clip number 7.
Well, I'm afraid that it's a rather ironic statement, because she is part of the concerns that people have raised about a bias in the Justice Department. She told an entire department to stand down and not to defend the president's first immigration order. At the time, I said that she was fired for good cause. I still believe that. I find her actions to be really quite unbelievable. Courts have divided on this issue. We're going to get a ruling soon from the Supreme Court, but you don't tell an entire department to stand down and not support a president of the United States.
Right.
And that type of action really fuels this sort of deep state, narrative that people have said. I don't know what the truth is about this investigation, but I definitely want to see what the truth is.
This is interesting, too, because, what he's reminding us of is that, Sally Yates, when she was still in the administration, she was in the Trump administration, and Sally Yates, President Trump issued his first travel ban. It's a Muslim travel ban. Let's be honest. It was a Muslim travel ban. And he talked about this all during the campaign. Look, we got to find a way to shut down Islamic immigration. It's a danger to our national security. We got to control it. We got to reduce it. We got to be sure we're vetting the people that come in. So I got no problem calling it a Muslim ban. You can call it anything you want. And President Trump has the right, according to the law, to ban immigration from anybody that he believes, in his own estimation, represents a detrimental, it has a detrimental impact on American policy. So he can do it. Absolutely legitimate to do it. But here you've got Sally Yates taking matters into her own hands and deciding on her own to shut down an entire department, the Department of Justice, saying you are not allowed to support the president in implementing this travel ban, even though it's perfectly legitimate, It's perfectly constitutional. It's perfectly legal. And it's what your boss wants you to do. I'm going to shut down this whole department before I will allow you to provide any help to the President of the United States. So Turley says that is not how you want to run a railroad. All right, number to call if you want to join the conversation, 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840 is the number to call. Play a couple of Candace Owens sound bites on race and playing the race card when we come back, and then we'll take your calls, 888-589-8840. Be right back.
Are you the oldest, middle, or youngest born in your family? Everyone has a birth order, and on the next Focus on the Family, Dr. Kevin Lehman shares how your birth order impacts who you are, who you marry, the job you choose, and the kind of parent you become. It's a great edition of the next Focus on the Family with Jim Daly.
Focus on the Family is heard each weekday morning at 5 o'clock Central on American Family Radio.
Did you know that as a federal or state employee, you have the opportunity to support the American Family Association through the combined federal campaign? You can designate a deduction each month to the organization of your choice, and AFA number 12037 is one of the few on the list fighting for your family. Help us continue to do so by designating your CFC contribution to 12037 when completing the CFC form in your payroll department.
Hi, I'm Jan Harper. If you're a pastor's wife like me, you probably know what it feels like to live in a fishbowl. You know, that feeling like everybody is watching your every move?
The annual AFA Pastor and Wife Fishbowl Retreat is 3 days and 2 nights of relaxation and building relationships. The retreat is hosted by Pastor Bert Harper of Exploring the Word and his wife Jan. Special guest speakers will include AFR morning personality J.J. Jasper and his wife Melanie. The AFA Fishbowl Retreat is set for October 9 through 11 at the Linden Valley Conference Center in Linden, Tennessee. Call 800-326-4543 extension 300 for registration and information. That's 800-326-4543 extension 300. Or visit repairingthefoundations.net. Registration is limited to the first 35 couples.
Get out of the fishbowl and into the AFA Pastor and Wife Fishbowl Retreat. We'll see you there.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Focal Point, Brian Fisher.
Welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Number to call if you want to join the conversation, 888-589-8840 is the number to call. Candace Owens remembers the young black woman, smart lady, who was the one that supported Donald Trump, and Kanye West liked what she said. So he retweeted some of her tweets, and before you know it, you had a dust storm on your hands. Here's Candace Owens, Prager University, talking about playing the race card. Listen to this.
Ironically, the people you might think have the most legitimate claim to the black card refuse to use it. Take my grandfather, for instance. He raised me from the time I was 9 years old. Born in 1941 in rural North Carolina, he started working at age 5, laying out tobacco to dry on a sharecropping farm. Jim Crow, separate drinking fountains, and the KKK were ever-present realities. He was 17 when he married my grandmother. He made a living cleaning homes and office buildings until he saved up enough money to open his own cleaning business. The thing is, he never played any card. Nor did my grandmother. If they had problems, they didn't blame anybody. They just fixed them. And they raised me to do the same. Chores were a requirement in their household. So was reading the Bible every morning before school. I didn't like the Bible readings, and I hated the chores. But I realize now that these small acts of discipline, although sometimes stifling, had a strong, positive impact on my character.
All right, Candace Owens, Bible's readings, I didn't like them, didn't like the chores, but they had a strong, positive impact on my character. And my grandparents did not play the race card, even though they would have been entitled to do it. Here is the second of two Candace Owens clips, clip 9.
I was a first-generation college student. This was supposed to be the ticket to prosperity, but it wasn't. I left college with a mountain of debt and no practical skills. I had just $80 in my bank account and very few prospects. I could have given up. I could have dug deep into my history and declared myself a natural product of ancestral oppression. I could have played the black card and absolved myself of all responsibility for my own stupid decisions. Except I didn't. Because it would have destroyed my grandfather's legacy. I am proud that he had the fortitude to turn nothing into something, and I have no intention of reversing that something back into a nothing. My attitude comes with a price, however. Because if you are born black and you don't accept your natural status as a victim, then the validity of your blackness is immediately called into question. Well, so be it.
All right, so she says, look, I'm not going to play the race card, and I'm not going to play the victim card, even though it's going to cost me, because if you're in the black community, you're born black, and you don't claim your victim status, you don't accept that as your status, then your validity as a black man or black woman is immediately called into question. She's not going to let that stop her. One quick good news story here from my old hometown of Fresno, California. Central Section Division I softball championship in Fresno last Friday night, played out of Fresno State, and the announcer announced before the game that there would be no national anthem before the game, and immediately the crowd booed, and then they started singing the national anthem on their own. They sang the whole Star Spangled Banner a cappella. Now, with that as a backdrop, let's play Andrea Mitchell clip number 10, talking about the NFL and all this brouhaha over whether athletes in the NFL are going to be required to stand for the anthem.
The hypocrisy is so profound. Take a look at any NFL stadium, and people are getting hot dogs, people are getting beers. They're not standing and saluting the anthem for a large part. They're not. They're distracted. They're fans at an event. And the fact that the players do not have this freedom of speech, and that no one is even thinking about Colin Kaepernick, who's their career over this issue, who has been, basically blackballed and can't be hired. It's just outrageous.
So all this pseudo-compassion for Colin Kaepernick, and she's just wrong about this. And maybe Andrea Mitchell has never been to a professional baseball game or a professional football game. Yeah, you got people buying hot dogs while the Star Spangled Banner's going on. But you look around the stands, man, everybody that's in the stands, they're standing. They're standing for the national anthem. They might have their hand over their heart. They might be singing along. Member of the military, they might have their cap under their arm, but they are standing for the national anthem. All right, well, let's go to the phones. 888-589-8840 is the number to call. 888-589-8840. Let's grab a call from Eric in Arkansas City, Kansas. Welcome, Eric. How are you, and what's on your mind?
I'm very well, thank you, and I appreciate your show. One comment I'd like to make is I feel these covert actions that the left is perpetrating is treason. And I also believe that President Obama and Hillary for Benghazi alone should be investigated for under the charges of treason to this country.
Yeah. Well, and I understand your desire for that, Eric, and I think a lot of people would have the same sympathy. I think we have to be careful. We need to be sure that if we are going to try somebody for treason, we need to make sure that it fits the constitutional definition of treason. And the first thing that's required for treason is that we have to have a known, declared, and stated enemy. And treason is aiding and abetting that enemy. So we have to be in a state of declared hostility, declared warfare with another nation before treason could even be committed. Doesn't mean that what they're doing is okay. Doesn't mean it's not wrong. Doesn't mean they can't be prosecuted for it. But treason is the only crime that's identified in the Constitution. and it means to aid and abet and give aid and comfort to the enemies of the United States. So what these people are doing, I believe, is harmful to the United States. There may even be some criminal activity that's connected with it, but I think we need to be real careful. Like, I appreciate what you're saying, because we want those that mean harm against this country, we want them to be stopped. We just need to be sure that we're thinking very clearly and constitutionally about that as we do it. All right, thanks for the call, Eric. That's a good call. Let's go to Sue in Richardson, Texas. Sue, welcome. What's on your mind?
Hi, Brian.
Hey.
I love your show.
Thank you.
I have actually become a more active Christian since I've been listening to you. I just love you.
Great.
And all your guys there, too.
Thank you.
You know, I've been listening every day, and, you know, my husband's on the opposite side of the fence, so we have some blowouts sometimes. And I tell you, one thing I keep waiting to hear is how would the Russians benefit from Trump becoming president? They keep saying, oh, well, the Russians were trying to interfere to get Trump elected, and I thought, you know, Hillary and Bill were the ones that were already benefiting. The Russians loved them. Why would they not want her in office? Yeah. I don't get it.
Well, Sue, you're exactly right. That's why that whole argument that the Russians were trying to help Trump defeat Hillary, that doesn't make any sense to me. You know, that makes no sense at all, because they already had a relationship with Hillary. They'd gotten 20% of our uranium deposits from Hillary Clinton. So they were in bed with Hillary Clinton, politically speaking. They had a relationship with her. They were fleecing her for 20% of our uranium. They had no reason not to want to help her get elected. And Trump was a wild card, you know, and the Russians have not been happy with what Trump has done since he's been president, all this stuff. You know, he's intervening over there with the Koreas, intervening with China and all that stuff, telling Iran to cool it, get out of Syria, red line in Syria, and he got after it when they crossed the red line. And remember, Syria is basically a Russian client state. They don't want Trump meddling in Syria. So I agree with you, Sue. I don't see any reason why that would make any sense. You know, and even Putin himself said, look, we didn't care. We didn't care who won because they're all the same to us. They do the same stuff. They say the same stuff. They produce the same policies, so we didn't even care.
The only reason I can think of is if Trump won, they'd get a discount on those $500,000 speeches by Bill Clinton. That's about it.
They could get a $500,000 speech for maybe $400,000, 20% discount. All right, let's go to John in Savannah, Tennessee. John, welcome. What's on your mind?
Hey, I just wanted to call in about Andrea Mitchell. I heard you refer to her report. She said that people in hot dog lines buying food, you know, wouldn't turn and say the Pledge of Allegiance or even pay any attention to it. I watched the Braves and the San Francisco Giants play on May the 4th. I was in the hot dog line when they started the national anthem. Everybody in the lines turned, took their hats off, put their hands over their hearts. We were singing. It's just not true. I don't understand why the false narrative is there, but for whatever reason, it seems like people want to drive that narrative.
Yeah.
It's simply not true. There are a lot of patriotic people in the world, and in America, I should say. And I think it's overwhelming how many people love this country, and for some reason, the national media wants people to think others do not love it.
Yeah, they do. They want the American people to share their distaste for this country. I would say it's even a hatred of this country, this hatred of this country and the way it was founded. They hate what the founders brought into being. They don't like it. They want to dismantle it. They want to get rid of it. And so anything that reminds them of that, they just simply don't like. And they want everybody in America to share that. That's why they have to be against it. And, you know, basically tell a lie about people in the hot dog stand. Just what you're saying, John. They will sing the national anthem. They'll turn, face the TV monitors, and sing the national anthem. All right, let's go to Ryan in Albany, Georgia. Ryan, I got 30 seconds. Hit me with your best shot.
Hey, I just wanted to comment on this poor tax on the poor people that you had made mention about.
Yeah.
Most of the people that are poor that they're talking about taxing on welfare or food stamps anyway, so the money's not coming out of their pocket in the first place. So why would they quit buying if they're not the ones that are going to be suffering?
Yeah. Well, and you're right. I mean, I don't know what the limits are on food stamp participation, but my assumption is they can buy sugary drinks with that, so who is going to stop them? All right, that's it for today. Bow low before God, stand tall before man, stand in the gap where God has placed you. Never forget, we're fighting a winnable war.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast do not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio. American Family Coffee is coffee with a cause. Not only is it a delicious way to start your day, but it can also wake you up to the idea of supporting the American Family Association through a product you'd normally buy anyway. Choose from morning blend, evening blend, and everything in between. Get your American Family